Smart marketers don't guess at what consumers will do. They use neuromarketers to influence our decision-making. And here with more insight is Martin Lindstrom. He is the author of the new book, Buyology, Truth and Lies About Why We Buy. Good to have you with us, Martin. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Now, in putting together this book, you did some studies and you used two types of technologies to really go after and figure out why people make buying decisions. What kinds of technology did you use in the study?
We used one technology called fMRI, and the F stands for functional. That's the type of technology you use when you're scanning people for tumors in hospitals. Very advanced, extremely expensive. Then we used another methodology called SST. It is a variation of EEG. It's much more simplistic, not as accurate. But the reason why we choose two technologies as the first in the world was to combine different sets of methods to make sure we got the most accurate results out of this. And this whole program was a 2,000 scan program. So we scanned 2,000 people around the world, a $7 million project. So it's very big and, of course, probably the most groundbreaking in the world about our non-conscious part of the brain.
So this is really a scientific study. This isn't just asking people in a room whether they prefer, blue or red. This is a real scientific study.
Tim, we didn't ask one single question. All of it is basically non-conscious. Because what's so interesting is, for example, if I shake your hand right now and I give you a limp handshake, right? You will probably immediately think, hey, I don't like that guy, right? Just because of 2 seconds of behavior. And what's interesting is you will probably not say it. You may even not think it, but you will feel it somewhere, and that will influence your perception about me.
And that would show up in one of these scientific
Absolutely.
ways that you were using to complete the study.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the things that you came away with, having done this work, is the difference between hope and optimism and fear, right? Because, even in the book you talk about how political advertising seems to want to focus on hope and optimism, and you came away saying, don't be so fast, right? What really works?
Well, what we learned was, and this is a bit sad, I have to admit, but fear sells. We saw that, for example, some of the most popular political ads, for example, the Daisy commercial. Do you remember the one?
Sure,
where
Barry Goldwater, sure, the
Exactly.
1964 presidential campaign.
Exactly. For Johnson, where he won, and he won because it was based on fear. Now, President Bush in 2004 had a commercial called The Wolf, where the wolf was crawling over the borders, and they talked about fear. Now, we scanned consumers' brains as they're watching those ads using fMRI, and people hated them. But what happened was an activation in the amygdala, which is the fear center. What we learned was, yes, people hated them, but they were acting in the end of the day and actually voting. And that basically means that we are hardwired to be seduced by fear. Why? Well, basically because when we were back in the jungles and were monkeys at that stage, we were reacting to survive. And fear is the main factor together with sex. So that's the reason why we're using scans to understand what we're not saying, but what we're feeling.
All right, so we know that fear really resonates and it sticks with people. What about sex? Does sex sell as often as the popular saying?
I hate to tell you that one, but no, it doesn't sell at all. Actually, what we learned is it's not the sex which sells, it is the controversy around it which sells. I saw the other day an ad for a huge burger chain here in the US. And I can't remember the burger chain, but I remember Paris Hilton was running it, right? And it's so interesting to see that when you look at those ads, we basically remember all the sex bits because we are, again, hardwired to reproduce each other, but the brand really falls behind. So the controversy makes it happen, but do you know what? It's not very controversial to talk about sex anymore. That's the reason why it doesn't work.
Talk about brands and its relationship to rituals and religion, because the study also pointed to some results there that might be controversial, almost more controversial than talking about sex.
Absolutely. What my theory always has been is that if you want to build powerful brands, learn from phenomena which have been around for a long time. Some religions has been around for 3,500 years. So we scanned people belonging to the faith of Christianity. We learned that certain regions in the brains are activated, and actually exactly the same regions in the brain was activated when, for example, we scanned the brains of Apple fans or Harley-Davidson fans or Hello Kitty fans. And that meant that we later on now are able to identify the pillars which are creating powerful brands. That is pillars like mystery, it's rituals, it is sense of belonging, to have a clear enemy. Just think about Mac versus Microsoft. All those factors will now be systematically built into brands. Hate it or love it, but that's the next generation of brand building.
And you mentioned in the book, for example, that Apple did something interesting that Microsoft didn't do during this recession. What was it?
Well, what they did was really interesting because Apple have decided to develop what I call a recession bridge brand. They released what is called an Apple Shuffle. It's a $79 brand. And basically what happens is you buy that thing to get the smell of the bakery when you walk into the store. But do you know what? When the recession is over, you used to go back to the store, and that's exactly what they did.
All right, we're going to continue the conversation. We've got more with Martin Lindstrom and subliminal advertising next. This is Taking Stock on Bloomberg. I'm Pim Fox. Smart marketers, as I said, they don't really guess about what consumers are doing. They use neuromarketers. I want to introduce Martin Lindstrom. He is the author of the new book, Buyology, Truth and Lies About Why We Buy. Martin, let's continue the conversation and focus on something subliminal advertising. Everyone maybe thinks that that is over and done with. It's been banned. True?
No, not true. Invented in 1956, it was banned across the world in 1957. Guess what? No one dared to touch it, except me, of course, because that's what we did in biology. We basically decided to scan people's brains as they're exposed to subliminal advertising. One of the companies in the world which are best at doing that is companies within the tobacco industry. It's been banned for 20 years to advertise for it, yet still the sales is going up around the world. And what we learned is it is incredibly powerful. You know, one example is, for example, we took a billboard and we put a cowboy on the billboard. No brand name next to it. Then we had the same billboard this time with a brand name on, and you can guess which brand it is. We had 600 smokers passing by. We scanned their brains. Guess what? The billboard without the logo were double as powerful as the one with the logo. And that's the first time ever we're proving that subliminal advertising actually works.
And still works. Thank you very much. I want to thank you, Martin Lindstrom, the author of the book Buyology, Truth and Lies About Why We Buy. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Now,